What happens when one of radio's most ruthless interviewers comes face to face with royalty's most controversial figure? The answer is a conversation so explosive it left viewers speechless and critics scrambling to pick sides. This is the story of how Howard Stern completely dismantled Meghan Markle on live television, and trust me, you need to hear every single word of what went down. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this interview is unlike anything you've ever seen before. The SiriusXM studio felt different that morning. Howard Stern sat behind his microphone, adjusting his headphones with the kind of calculated precision that comes from decades of broadcasting. Across from him, Meghan Markle settled into her chair, her posture perfect, her smile rehearsed. What started as a routine promotional interview for her latest venture was about to become one of the most uncomfortable exchanges in recent memory. "So, Meghan," Howard began, his voice carrying that familiar edge that longtime listeners know means trouble. "Let's talk about authenticity. You've built your brand around being real, being genuine. But help me understand something. How does someone go from a cable television actress to lecturing the world about social justice while living in a $16 million mansion?" Meghan's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Howard, I think there's a misconception about what privilege means and how we can use our platforms for good. Just because someone has been fortunate doesn't mean they can't advocate for those who haven't had the same opportunities." Right, Howard nodded, but his tone suggested he wasn't buying it. "But see, here's what I don't get. You married into literally the most privileged family on the planet. The same family that your husband spent years complaining about, by the way. And now you're both sitting in California making Netflix deals worth hundreds of millions while telling us regular people how we should think and feel about inequality. Don't you see how that might come across as, I don't know, hypocritical?" The studio fell silent except for the quiet hum of equipment. Meghan straightened in her chair, her media training kicking in. "I think what you're missing, Howard, is that Harry and I stepped away from those privileges precisely because we wanted to use our voices authentically. We gave up titles, we gave up security, we gave up a guaranteed future because we believed in something bigger than ourselves." "Oh, you gave up security?" Howard's voice rose slightly, the skepticism dripping from every word. "Meghan, you live behind gates with private security that costs more than most people make in a lifetime. You gave up taxpayer-funded security to pay for private security with money you're making from the same royal connections you claim to have walked away from. Help me understand how that's a sacrifice." Meghan's composure began to crack. "Howard, I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. The security threats we face are real. The racism we've experienced is real. The pain of being ostracized by an institution that was supposed to protect us is real." "Racism," Howard repeated, leaning back in his chair. "Let's talk about that. You've made some pretty serious accusations about the royal family. But here's what I'm struggling with. You knew exactly what family you were marrying into. This isn't some surprise revelation. The British monarchy has a 1,000-year history that includes slavery, colonialism, and yes, institutional racism. Did you really think you were going to single-handedly change centuries of tradition by showing up with a briefcase full of good intentions?" "I think I had a naive belief that love could conquer those things," Meghan replied, her voice tighter now. "I believed that by being authentic, by being myself, I could help modernize an institution that desperately needed it." Howard laughed. "But there was no humor in it. Authentic. Meghan, come on. You literally had a team of handlers coaching you on how to walk, how to wave, how to hold a teacup. You had stylists choosing every outfit, speechwriters crafting every public statement. Where exactly was the authenticity in any of that?" "That's not fair," Meghan shot back, her composure finally beginning to slip. "Every public figure has support staff. Every person in the public eye has people helping them navigate complex situations. That doesn't make someone inauthentic, but it does make someone calculated," Howard pressed. "And that's fine, by the way. Calculation isn't a crime, but don't sit here and tell me and my audience that you're just a regular person who happened to stumble into this situation. You're a former actress who married a prince, leveraged that connection into a global platform. And now you're monetizing your victimhood while living a lifestyle that 99% of the world will never experience." Meghan's eyes flashed. with anger monetizing my victimhood. Howard, I shared my story because other people were already telling it, and they were telling it wrong. I spoke my truth because staying silent was literally killing me. I had suicidal thoughts. I was trapped in a system that refused to protect me or my child. And I'm sorry you went through that, Howard said, his tone softening slightly. Mental health struggles are real, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But here's my question. If the situation was so unbearable, if the institution was so toxic, why didn't you just leave quietly? Why the Oprah interview? Why the Netflix series? Why the book deals? And the podcast and the constant media appearances? If you wanted privacy and peace, you sure have a funny way of showing it. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain her composure. Because Howard, sometimes staying silent enables the very systems that hurt people. Sometimes you have to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people question your motives. Sometimes telling your truth is the only way to heal and to help others who might be going through similar experiences. But whose truth are we talking about here? Howard shot back immediately. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like there's your truth, there's Harry's truth, there's the royal family's truth, and then there's what actually happened. And those might be for completely different things. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Meghan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly not expecting this level of aggressive questioning. Howard, sensing blood in the water, pressed forward with the relentless intensity that had made him both famous and infamous. You know what, Meghan? Let's talk about those different truths, Howard continued, his voice gaining momentum. You sat with Oprah and painted this picture of being completely naive about royal protocol, about not knowing you had to curtsy to the Queen, about being shocked by the formality of it all. But you're an actress. You've studied characters, you've researched roles. Are you really telling me you did zero homework before marrying into the most scrutinized family on earth? Meghan's jaw tightened. Howard, there's a difference between intellectual knowledge and lived experience. I could read about royal protocol all day, but until you're actually living it, until you're experiencing the suffocating reality of it, you don't truly understand what it means. Suffocating reality, Howard repeated slowly. Meghan, you had a fairy tale wedding watched by billions of people. You lived in palaces. You had staff waiting on you hand and foot. You wore jewelry worth more than most people's houses. In what universe is that suffocating? In the universe where you can't leave your house without permission, Meghan fired back, her voice rising. In the universe where every word you speak is scrutinized and twisted. In the universe where your own family leaks stories about you to the press to make themselves look better. Howard leaned forward, sensing an opening. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. The leaking, it's interesting you bring that up, because I've been following this story closely, and it seems like there's been plenty of leaking coming from your side too. Friends speaking to magazines, sources close to you giving quotes to journalists. How exactly does that work? Are you coordinating those leaks, or are your friends just coincidentally all talking to the same reporters? That's completely different. Meghan protested, but Howard wasn't letting her off the hook. Is it though? Because it sounds like you're upset about a game that you're also playing? You're mad about the royal family's relationship with the press, but you've got your own PR machine working overtime. You complain about media intrusion while simultaneously courting media attention. Do you see the contradiction here? Meghan's composure was cracking more visibly now. Howard, you're oversimplifying a complex media landscape. When lies are being told about you, when your character is being assassinated, sometimes you have to set the record straight. Set the record straight? Howard nodded mockingly. Right, and who decides what the record is? Because I've got to. I'll tell you, from an outside perspective, it looks like you and Harry have made a career out of complaining about your incredibly privileged problems. You left the royal family because you wanted privacy, and then you immediately signed deals to tell everyone about your private business. You wanted to be financially independent, so you leveraged the exact royal connections you claim were so toxic. Make it make sense. We needed to support ourselves, Meghan said defensively. We lost our security funding. We lost our home. We had to start over completely. Howard's laugh was sharp and incredulous. You had to start over, Meghan. You started over with more money, connections, and opportunities than 99.9% of people will ever have. Start over. You cashed in. And that's fine, by the way. Cash in all you want, but don't pretend you're some kind of victim while you're doing it. I am a victim, Meghan said quietly, but her voice carried a steel edge. I'm a victim of a racist institution that tried to destroy me. I'm a victim of a press campaign designed to tear me down. I'm a victim of a system that protects itself by sacrificing anyone who threatens its power. Howard paused, studying her carefully. Okay, let's talk about the racism, because that's a serious accusation, and it deserves serious discussion. You've said there were concerns about your son's skin color. That's horrific, if true. But here's what I don't understand. You've never named who said it. You've never provided specifics. You've made this devastating accusation against the entire institution while projecting the actual person who allegedly said it. Why Meghan looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time, it would be very damaging to that person. But it's not damaging to paint the entire royal family as racist, Howard pressed. It's not damaging to suggest that this ancient institution is fundamentally prejudiced against people of color. You'll burn down the whole house to protect the person who lit the match. That's not what I was trying to do, Meghan said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it, though? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you made a calculated decision to drop a bomb without providing any way for people to understand the context or the intent behind those conversations. You created maximum damage with minimum accountability. That's not seeking justice, Meghan. That's playing politics. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Meghan finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't understand what it's like to be the only person of color in those rooms, Howard. You don't understand the subtle ways racism manifests in those environments. You're right, Howard acknowledged. I don't understand that experience, and I won't pretend to. But I do understand media manipulation, and I understand the difference between seeking justice and seeking revenge. Which one are you really after? Here, Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. How dare you question my motives when it comes to racism? How dare you sit there and suggest that my experience of discrimination is somehow calculated or manipulative? Because everything else about your public persona has been calculated and manipulative. Howard shot back without hesitation. The timing of your interviews, the choice of your platforms, the way you've rolled out your allegations, it's all been carefully orchestrated for maximum impact. So forgive me if I question whether this is about justice or about leverage. You have no idea what you're talking about, Meghan said, her composure completely gone now. You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected and criticized by people who don't know you, who've never walked in your shoes, who sit in judgment from the comfort of their studios and their privilege. Howard smiled coldly. Actually, Meghan, I know exactly what that's like. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've been hated, criticized, canceled, boycotted, and sued more times than I can count. The difference is, I never pretended to be a victim while I was cashing the checks. The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Her perfectly composed facade finally shattered completely. Revealing the raw anger that had been building throughout the interview, she leaned forward in her chair, her voice trembling with fury. How dare you compare your situation to mine? You're a white man who built his career on shock value and controversy. I'm a woman of color who married into an institution that has spent centuries oppressing people who look like me. We are not the same. Howard didn't flinch. You're absolutely right. We're not the same. I never claimed to be fighting for social justice while living off the very system I was criticizing. I never positioned myself as a humanitarian while building a brand around my personal grievances. And I certainly never used my race or gender as a shield against legitimate criticism. A shield? Meghan's voice was incredulous. You think my identity is a shield? You think the racism I've experienced is some kind of convenient excuse? I think you've weaponized your identity in a way that makes it impossible to have an honest conversation about your choices and your behavior, Howard replied calmly. Every time someone questions your motives or your actions, you hide behind claims of racism or sexism. It's a brilliant strategy, actually. It puts your critics in an impossible position. Meghan stood up abruptly, her composure completely gone. This interview is over. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Sit down, Meghan, Howard said firmly. You came on my show. You agreed to this conversation. You don't get to run away when the questions get uncomfortable. That's exactly the kind of behavior I'm talking about. For a moment, it looked like Meghan might actually leave. She stood frozen, clearly torn between her desire to escape and her understanding that walking out would only prove Howard's point. Finally, she sat back down, but her body language radiated defiance. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "What else do you want to know?" "I want to know when you're going to take responsibility for your own choices," Howard said bluntly. "You chose to marry Harry. You chose to join the royal family. You chose to leave the royal family. You chose to do the Oprah interview. You chose to sign the Netflix deal. You chose to write the book. When do you stop blaming everyone else and own your decisions?" "I own my decisions," Meghan said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Do you? Because every time you talk about your life, it's about what was done to you, not what you chose to do. You were trapped. You were silenced. You were abandoned. You were betrayed. Where's your agency in any of this story? Where's your accountability?" Meghan was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Accountability. Fine, I'll give you accountability. I underestimated how difficult it would be. I underestimated the scrutiny, the pressure, the isolation. I thought I could handle it, and I couldn't. I thought I could change things from the inside, and I was wrong. Is that what you want to hear?" Howard studied her carefully. "It's a start, but here's what I really want to hear. I want to hear you acknowledge that you've profited enormously from your royal connection, while simultaneously condemning the institution that gave you that platform. I want to hear you admit that your campaign against the royal family has been as much about personal revenge as it has been about social justice." "That's not true," Meghan protested, but her voice was weak, isn't it? "You've made millions of dollars telling your side of the story. You've built an entire brand around being the wronged princess. You've leveraged your royal title, the same title you claim to have rejected, to open doors that would never have opened for Rachel Meghan Markle from Los Angeles. If that's not profiting from the institution you're criticizing, what is?" Meghan's silence stretched on, and Howard pressed his advantage. "Here's the thing, Meghan. I don't think you're evil. I don't think you're malicious. I think you're human. I think you made choices that seemed right at the time. And when those choices had consequences you didn't expect, you looked for someone to blame. But the story you've constructed, this narrative of victimhood and righteousness, it doesn't hold. Up under scrutiny, and deep down, I think you know that." When Meghan finally spoke, her voice was different. Quieter, more vulnerable. "You think I don't know that every choice has consequences? You think I don't know that leaving the royal family meant giving up certain protections and privileges? You think I don't know that speaking publicly about my experience would invite exactly this kind of criticism? Then why do it?" Howard asked, his tone softer now. "If you knew it would lead to this, why put yourself through it?" Meghan looked directly at him for the first time in several minutes, because sometimes the cost of staying silent is higher than the cost of speaking up. "Because I have a son who will grow up seeing how his mother was treated, and I want him to know that she fought back. Because there are other women, other people of color, who might find themselves in similar situations, and they deserve to know they're not alone. And the money, the fame, the platform," Howard pressed, "are tools," Meghan said simply. "Tools I can use to amplify voices that need to be heard, to support causes that matter, to create change in whatever way I can." Howard leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You know what, Meghan? That's the most honest thing you've said all morning. And if you'd led with that instead of the victim narrative, we might have had a very different conversation." The studio fell silent, except for the quiet hum of equipment. Meghan looked drained, as if the fight had gone out of her completely. "So where does that leave us?" she asked quietly. "It leaves us with the truth," Howard said, "which is that you're a complicated person who made complicated choices in a complicated situation. You're not the saint your supporters want you to be, and you're not the villain your critics paint you as. You're just a person trying to figure it out as you go, like the rest of us." Meghan nodded slowly. "I can live with that." "Good," Howard said, "because that's all any of us can do." As the interview wound down, the tension in the room gradually dissipated, replaced by something that might have been mutual respect. It wasn't the conversation either of them had expected, but it was perhaps the one they both needed to have. The cameras stopped rolling, but the impact of what had just transpired would be felt for much longer. In 30 minutes of brutal honesty, Howard Stern had accomplished what years of royal protocol and media training had failed to do. He had gotten Meghan Markle to drop her carefully constructed persona and reveal the human being underneath. Whether that revelation would help or hurt her public image remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. This was an interview that would be dissected and debated for years to come. Make sure to subscribe if you want more content like this. And let me know in the comments. Do you think Howard went too far? Or did Meghan need to hear these hard truths?